Warren Buffett, the king of value investing, has definitely built a cult-like following over the years. And well, he's undoubtedly my investing idol too. But what I find so interesting about his investment strategy, the one that's made him 20% returns per year since 1965, is that it literally boils down to a short list of rules that anyone can follow. So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through Warren's 7 rules step by step with examples so that you can apply these to your own investing in 2024 and get rich. With that said, let's start with his first rule, which is don't hold a stock for 10 minutes unless you're willing to hold it for 10 years.
I'm not recommending that people buy stocks today or tomorrow or next week or next month. I think it all depends on your circumstances, but you shouldn't buy stocks unless you expect, in my view, you expect to hold them for a very extended period and you are prepared financially and psychologically to hold them the same way you would hold a farm and never look at a quote and never pay it. You don't need to pay attention to them.
Warren has always described investing as a game of psychology, much more than a game of intellectual ability, and a part of forming those successful thought patterns is to focus on the long term. Buffett's famous quote here is, "Don't hold a company for 10 minutes unless you're willing to hold it for 10 years." And this helps you ward off the gambling mindset. It instead makes you focus on the actual business you're buying and its future. Giving great businesses a long time to compound is exactly how Warren has created his fortune. American Express, Coca-Cola, Bank of America, Visa, and Moody's are all large holdings in the Berkshire portfolio, but each stock has also been held for more than 10 years. In fact, Buffett first bought Coca-Cola back in 1988. In total, he spent about $1.3 billion, but today, through the passage of time and the power of long-term compounding, that investment is worth $24.8 billion and pays Buffett $700 million a year just in dividends.
You've got to be prepared to, when you buy a stock, to have it go down 50% or more and be comfortable with it as long as you're comfortable with the holding. And I pointed out 3 times in Berkshire's history when the price of Berkshire stock went down 50%. There wasn't anything wrong with Berkshire when those 3 times occurred. But if you're going to look at the price of the stock and think that you have to act because it's doing this or that, or somebody else tells you, well, how can you stay with that when something else is going up or anything? You've got to be in the right psychological position. And frankly, some people are not really careful. Some people are more subject to fear than others.
In short, focus on the long term. Avoid short-term gambling and only invest in something if you're willing to hold on to it for at least 10 years.
The real test of whether you're investing from a value standpoint or not is whether you care whether the stock market is open tomorrow. If you're making a good investment in a security, it shouldn't bother you if they close down the stock market for 5 years.
And with that, we come to Buffett's next big rule, which is quite simply, don't lose money.
The first rule in investment is don't lose. And the second rule in investment is don't forget the first rule, and that's all the rules there are. I mean, if you buy things for far below what they're worth, and you buy a group of them, you basically don't lose money.
This is Warren Buffett's famous rule number 1 of investing, which is also made popular by Phil Town and his book, Rule Number 1. Now, let me put this in simpler terms. Imagine you're playing a game, and it might sound obvious, but it's essential to keep your mindset right when you're playing in the stock market. Picture this. You're picking 10 businesses to invest in. If you choose 6 good ones out of those 10, you're doing great. But here's the secret sauce. Make sure those other 4 don't drag you down. Warren Buffett gives us some valuable advice here. He says that if you find yourself in a tough spot, like a hole, stop digging. This applies to stock market investing too. The tricky part is when you start losing money. People tend to think they should invest even more to make up for the losses. But sometimes it's smarter to cut your losses and walk away. But here's the golden rule from Buffett. Pay close attention to how much businesses are really worth before buying them. Try to get them for less than their actual value and don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you do this, you'll lower your chances of losing money. Let's look at an example. Buffett invested in Taiwan Semiconductor in 2022, but he realized he had made a mistake and sold it pretty quickly. The cool part is that because he got it at a low price, he didn't lose much, and he might have even made money. So, always remember Buffett's #1 rule: don't lose money. And in the same vein, that leads us right to his next rule, which is to always buy below intrinsic value.
The only reason for making an investment and laying out money now is to get more money later on, right? That's what investing is all about. If you buy Coca-Cola today, the company is selling for about $110 to $15 billion in the market. The question is, if you had 110 or 15 billion, you wouldn't be listening to me, but I'd be listening to you instead. But the question is, would you lay it out today to get what the Coca-Cola company is going to deliver to you over the next 200 or 300 years? The discount rate doesn't make much difference after as you get further out. And that is a question of how much cash they're going to give you. It isn't a question of, it isn't a question of how many analysts are going to recommend it or what the volume in the stock is or what the chart looks like or anything. It's a question of how much cash it's going to give you. That's the only reason. It's true if you're buying a farm. It's true if you're buying an apartment house. Any financial asset. Oil in the ground, you're laying out cash now to get more cash back later on. And the question is how much are you going to get, when are you going to get it, and how sure are you?
That's what a lot of people miss when they start out in stock market investing. It's not about betting that a company will be the next big thing. It's more about looking at how much money a company actually makes, how well it's growing, and then making a sensible guess about how much money it will make in the future. Now here's the trick. You should only buy a company's stock if you can get it for a good deal today compared to what it might be worth in the future. This is what they call buying below intrinsic value. This might sound like a lot to digest, and honestly, it's a big topic. If you want to dive deep into this, you can check out a video that goes into all the details. It's like a special tool called a discounted cash flow analysis that Warren Buffett uses to figure out how much a company is really worth. But let's look at a real example to make it clear. Buffett bought Apple stock in 2016. At that time, Apple was worth about $600 billion in total. It's like buying a fancy gadget for $12 when it's actually worth $100. Even though there are some not-so-great businesses out there, Buffett saw that Apple was a top-notch company with a bright future. And as we talked about earlier, that turned out to be a fantastic move for him. So remember, Buffett's rule: always buy below intrinsic value.
But the real question is, Berkshire's selling for, we'll say, 105 or so billion now. What can we distribute from that 100? If you're going to buy the whole company for 105 billion now, can we distribute enough cash to you soon enough to make it sensible at present interest rates to lay out that cash now? And that's what it gets down to. And if you can't answer that question, you can't buy the stock. You can gamble in the stock if you want to, or your neighbors can buy it. But if you don't answer that question, and I can't answer that for internet companies, for example. There are a lot of companies, there are all kinds of companies I can't answer it for, but I just stay away from those.
So make sure you're buying well below intrinsic value. And if you're not sure, stay away. And that leads us perfectly into Buffett's next big lesson, which is to stick to businesses that you understand.
I have an old-fashioned belief that I only should expect to make money in things that I understand. And when I say understand, I don't mean understand, what the product does or anything like that. I mean understand what the economics of the business are likely to look like 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I know, in general, what the economics of, say, Wrigley chewing gum will look like 10 years from now. The internet isn't going to change the way people chew gum. It isn't going to change which gum they chew. If you own the chewing gum market in a big way, and you've got Double Mint and Spearmint and Juicy Fruit, those brands will be there 10 years from now. So I can't pinpoint exactly what the numbers are going to look like on Wrigley, but I'm not going to be way off if I try to look forward on something like that. That evaluating that company is within what I call my circle of competence. I understand what they do, I understand the economics of it, I understand the competitive aspects of the business.
Many new investors make a common mistake when they start. They might use tools to find cheap-looking stocks, but they don't really understand the companies they're investing in. This becomes a problem when the stock prices start going up and down. Imagine you bought a stock and the next day it drops by 30%. Now you're wondering if you should hang on to it or sell it. To make that decision, you need to know the company inside out. It's like buying a car. You'd want to know everything about it before driving it. So always make sure you really understand the businesses you're investing in, especially when things get bumpy in the stock market.
Defining your circle of competence is the most important aspect of investing. It's not how important, how large your circle is. You don't have to be an expert on everything. But knowing where the perimeter of that circle of what you know and what you don't know is, and staying inside of it, is all important. And if I don't understand something, but I get all excited about it because my neighbors are talking about it, the stocks are going up and everything, I start fooling around someplace else, eventually I'll get creamed, and I should.
As Buffett says, it doesn't matter how big your circle is, just that you're staying inside of it. And if you start drifting into businesses you don't understand, it's only a matter of time before you get creamed. And with that said, let's get on to Buffett's next rule, which is something he's changed his mind on over the years, and that is, don't buy cigar butts.
I've been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis. Look around for things that are cheap. And that I was taught that, we'll say in 1949 or 50. It made a big impression on me. So I went around looking for what I call used cigar butts of stocks. And the cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts and you find this, on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar, one puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. It's disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake. Although you can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses. So now I would rather buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price.
Let's break it down. Buffett used to look for really cheap but not so great companies. He thought if you bought lots of them, you'd make decent money. But he realized that wasn't the best strategy. Instead, he found that it's smarter to invest in top-notch businesses, even if they're not super cheap. Imagine buying a reliable car. It might cost a bit more, but it's worth it because it runs well and lasts a long time. For example, he did this with Apple. It wasn't dirt cheap, but it's a fantastic company. And guess what? It turned out to be a fantastic investment. So, focus on great businesses at fair prices, not just any business at a super low price. That's the key takeaway here. Next up, I have 2 more investing lessons to round out the Buffett mantra philosophy, both of which have to do with psychology. And this one is one of Buffett's most classic quotes, which is to be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy.
People behave very peculiarly in terms of the reactions because they're human beings and they get excited when others get excited, they get greedy when others get greedy, they get fearful when others get fearful, and they'll continue to do so. And you will see things you won't believe in your lifetime in securities markets. Investors behave in very human ways, which is they get very excited during bull markets, and when they look in the rearview mirror and they see a lot of money having been made in the last few years, they plow in and they just push and push and push on prices. And when they look in the rearview mirror and they see no money having been made, they just say this is a lousy place to be. So they don't care what's going on in the underlying business, and it's astounding. But that makes for huge opportunity, just huge opportunity.
Buffett has always talked about this. Most investors act like a flock of sheep. They all do the same things at the same time, like getting greedy when others do and getting scared when others panic. This behavior can make the stock market go up and down a lot. But here's the trick. If you can break away from the flock and invest in top-notch companies when everyone else is freaking out, you can make the kind of money Buffett did. For example, during the big financial crisis in 2008, when banks were in trouble, Buffett invested a lot of money in companies like Goldman Sachs and Mars. In 2011, he did the same with Bank of America. He knew these businesses well, so he wasn't too worried. He took advantage of the panic and made smart investments. That's the key to his success.
It doesn't take brains, it takes temperament. It takes the ability to sit there and look at something. When I started out in 1950, I would go through and find things at 2 times earnings, and they were perfectly decent businesses, and people wanted jobs at those companies, and everybody knew they were going to be around, and they wouldn't buy them at 2 times earnings, and that's when interest rates were 2.5%.
So it's about waiting for those smack-bang home runs when everyone else is convinced that the sun won't come up tomorrow. But the trick is that you have to show up. Golden opportunities are very rare. You won't get that many in your lifetime. So when they do come along, you have to follow Buffett's last investing rule, which is to seize your golden opportunities.
Big opportunities in life have to be seized. We don't do very many things, but when we get the chance to do something that's right and big, we've got to do it. And even to do it in a small scale is just as big a mistake almost as not doing it at all. I mean, you've really got to grab them when they come, because you're not going to get 500 great opportunities.
In my 28 years of life, I've noticed that there have only been 3 really great opportunities to make money in the stock market: the dot-com crash, the global financial crisis, and the stock market crash in 2020. These opportunities come around roughly once every 10 years, so they're not very common. To take advantage of them, you need to stay alert and mentally prepare yourself to take action when they happen. The most important thing is to be ready to act. Unfortunately, many people miss out on these opportunities because they're busy with distractions like watching TikTok instead of studying the stock market. Even right now, as you're watching this video, you have a chance to learn, but most people still won't take action. So, the key is to act. If you're serious about making money in the stock market, and I assume you are because you've made it this far into the video, consider setting some investing goals for the next month. It could be something like investing your first $500, reading a company's annual report, or picking up a popular stock market book. Whatever it is, create a plan and commit to it so that you actually take action. Don't just listen to the world's best investors sharing their secrets and then do nothing about it.
The biggest mistakes we've made by far, I've made, not we've made, biggest mistakes I've made by far are mistakes of omission and not commission. I mean, it's the things I knew enough to do, they were within my circle of competence, and I was sucking my thumb. And that is really, those are the ones that hurt. They don't show up anyplace. I probably cost Berkshire at least $5 billion, for example, by sucking my thumb 20 years ago or close to it when Fannie Mae was having some troubles, and we could have bought the whole company for practically nothing. And I don't worry about that if it's Microsoft because I don't know it. Because Microsoft isn't in my circle of competence. And so I don't have any reason to think I'm entitled to make money out of Microsoft or out of cocoa beans or whatever. But I did know enough to understand Fannie Mae, and I blew it. And that never shows up under conventional accounting. But I know the cost of it. I know, I passed it up. And those are the big, big mistakes.
So when you get that pitch right in your hitting zone, make sure you swing. You might not swing for many, many years, but when you do get that perfect pitch, swing hard. And they, my friends, are Warren Buffett's 7 rules of investing. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more weekly videos. Leave a comment below. Take care.